Okay, so this isn't going to be like most of the other best and worst of 2021 videos on YouTube for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I don't exclusively play new games, as you've probably noticed. Some of the games I'm going to talk about in this video are almost 30 years old. I have included games from 2021, of course, but I think that many would agree that 2021 wasn't chock full of must-play new releases. And because of that, it was an excellent year to look back and smash some of that dusty back catalogue, and smash it I did. I played a real mixture of new and old games last year, which made me look at the new stuff I was playing through a different lens. Just little things, like how many old games run at 60 frames per second, something that many new games still struggle to hit, and how things like ray tracing and 4K resolutions are no substitute for solid art direction. The second reason this video is going to be different, and specifically from my regular content, is that it's mostly unscripted. I wanted to get this out before the end of January, and I also just wanted to express my thoughts in a kind of raw and laid-back format. I don't know if this worked, but you can let me know if I succeeded or not. One other thing I'd like to mention just before we get started is I'm just getting over a nasty virus. I originally thought it was corona. My wife tested positive to coronavirus, so it seemed likely that I would have it too, but I took 2 tests and it went negative, but I still got smashed worse than anyone in my house, so lucky me. I sound a lot worse than I am, but yeah, if you're used to how I normally sound, this is definitely not it. Okay, so with that said, this is my personal list of noteworthy gaming experiences from 2021. Notice that I said gaming experiences, not exclusively games. This means I'm going to talk about gaming tech too, because reviewing hardware has become a big part of what I do here on the channel. Now this video includes both the good and bad, but it's mostly good. YouTube is only my side hustle, so unlike a lot of other reviewers, I'm not obligated to play through loads of new game releases. This means that I can cherry pick the stuff that I know will be worth my time and avoid the stuff that doesn't interest me and or I've read bad things about. Now occasionally a lemon will slip past my defense system, so I'll be talking about those as well. Okay, so that's definitely enough disclaimer. Let's get into it and kick things off by getting the disappointing stuff out of the way first. There are lots of reasons for each of these games being on my worst of 2021 list, but all 3 were games that I was initially really hyped for that turned out to be huge disappointments. The first of these is a game called Observation. It was created by some of the team that worked on Alien Isolation, including the lead UI designer, who was actually the writer-director here. Actually, he's the founder of NoCode, the studio who built the game. This is what initially drew me to the game. Alien Isolation, as many of you know, is one of my favorite games of all time, and specifically, I love the way that the UI was handled in that game to create interesting puzzles. So when I found out that a lot of the team, including the UI designer, had come together to work on another game that was also set in space, that was also a thriller, that also had puzzles, I was like so pumped to play this. And on the surface, it looks and sounds great. It's definitely not next gen. It's not pushing any crazy new tech or doing anything super fancy. It's got heaps of atmosphere. It's got great characters. It's got a really fantastic story. The problem is that all of this is completely undermined by some of the worst puzzles I've experienced ever in any game, in any medium. These weren't really puzzles at all. These were kind of like basic tasks that were obscured by really unintuitive controls or just basically a lack of information of what you were supposed to do. The best way to describe it is trying to figure out how to use a washing machine when you don't have the instruction manual and you're trying to make sense of all of those little icons that don't have labels. Basically, I found it frustrating as hell, and my product designer brain just couldn't handle it. And it was very disappointing because, you know, it had the pedigree, it has the story. Mechanically, it's a fine game to play. Like it feels good to play. It just, that component of it, which is, you know, the main component, the puzzles, it's basically a puzzle game, just doesn't work for me. And yeah, very disappointing. The next most disappointing game I played was Scott Pilgrim. Now, this is obviously not a new game. It came out 10, 11 years ago, but it got a re-release, so for modern hardware. I didn't play it back in the day. I may have played a demo, so I've waited 10 years to play it, and I love me a good 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up. And, you know, this game looks the part, it sounds great, but it lacks any kind of depth to the gameplay. And I just find it really grindy. Enemies are just like take an absolute pummeling, and eventually you get to a point where you're more powerful and the gameplay becomes a bit looser and a bit more freeform, but it just doesn't work for me. And I even splashed out and bought the physical edition from Limited Run Games, so I have a nice, limited edition box copy of the game, which I will probably not play anymore because, yeah, I just don't like it. And the third game which disappointed me in 2021, and I might even say it disappointed me the most, Observation was a pretty big letdown, but Deathloop was supposed to be the game that introduced me to next gen. It was also the first game I had played from Arcane Studios. It was my first Arcane game. The immersive sim isn't something that I've particularly experienced before, so I thought this was going to be the perfect entry point. I thought this was going to be, the critics had said this was amazing, it was unmissable. So yeah, I thought this was going to be a really fun game. I had really high hopes for it, and if I had to pick a single word to describe it, it would be fucking underwhelming. Alright, it's 2 words, but that's the best way that I can describe it. Where do I start? To me, it feels unfinished, like the developers had plans to flesh it out, but at some point during the progress of development or during the project, they just decided to cut it short, finish off what they had, and just ship what they had. I mean, all the pieces are there for something really interesting and really challenging, but when it boils down to it, it's just a really, or at least what I think, it's a really simple shooter with some light exploration and light puzzle elements. People say, it takes a while for this game to click, but I played about 8 hours of this game, and what clicked with me after that is that you can throw away all of the mechanics bar the shooting mechanics. You can basically walk into any scenario and go guns blazing, and generally that is the best way to, get rid of a room full of bad guys or solve any problem. And I just thought it was easy. It was so easy. There was no challenge whatsoever. Once you figure out that the enemy AI is really dumb, you can sneak right up behind them and they don't notice you at all. Or you can kill one enemy in plain sight of another one and they don't notice. It's so easy, so unchallenging, and I was so disappointed. I don't say this very often about games, but I hated Deathloop. And if you were hoping this was going to be a good entry point to the immersive sim or to Arcane games, I'd strongly recommend maybe considering some of their other games, even though I haven't played them, but this ain't it, Chief. Now, the last thing that disappointed me in 2021, and this is a tricky one because it hasn't fully disappointed me, but it's the PS5. So late in 2021, I got a PS5. I got one in December, and there's a few things that I don't like about it. Like, ultimately, I got it to replace my PS4 Pro. I want to be able to play all my PS4 games, in faster frame rates and with the maximum resolutions and stuff, which it does, which is great. But there's a handful of things that are really frustrating about it. So one of those is that it doesn't charge my Astro headset. I've got a pair of Astro A50s, and the PS4 or the PS4 Pro would charge these when it was in rest mode, which is great. The PS5 doesn't do this, so I'm constantly having to unplug my headset and plug it into a PC or something like that and charge it separately, which is just plugging and unplugging things, and having to remember to charge things is it's a pain in the ass. Also, it doesn't have an optical out, which I suppose is Sony kind of saying, well, the future is digital. We're not worrying about analog signals or, signals like optical anymore. But again, when using a headset like an Astro A50 or any other kind of headset which splits the audio, like the game chat and the game audio using physical cables, you then have to get a splitter, and this is just, it's yet another thing to clutter up my setup. I also don't like how the controller battery lifetime is quite short. Like, the new DualSense controller is amazing and haptic feedback is amazing, but man, does it chew battery time. So constantly having to charge batteries is a big pain. I would actually recommend getting 2 controllers if you have a PS5, just so that you can always have one on the charge, because if you plan on sitting down and playing for like 4 or 5 hours, depending on the game, your controller's going to go flat. So you're either going to have it wired in while you play, or you're going to have a backup on the charge. So I ended up getting myself a charging dock because I felt that was kind of essential, and 2 controllers. Okay, so that was the stuff that disappointed me the most in 2021. I think overall, though, there were way more things to celebrate than there were things that pissed me off. Now, before we get to the stuff that made me tighten the pants, there are a few honourable mentions I'd like to make. These were experiences that were good, just not mind-blowingly so. The first of these is Hot Shot Racing. It's a throwback to 90s arcade races, which is totally my jam. It's a complete blast of nostalgia, and it really makes me lament the loss of Sega's arcade racing games. So Hot Shot Racing was a real honest attempt to emulate those sorts of games. Yeah, and it's definitely worth checking out if you like the 90s arcade racer style of gameplay. Astro's Playroom on the PS5 was another game that was a real surprise, really. It's the first game that my son, who's only 7 years old, has really got into. Like, he's played plenty of games before, like Sonic Mania, and there's another Sonic game on the PS4 he's played. But this was the first game that he really got into, and I could see that the more he played it, the better that he got at it. And if you have kids, and specifically young kids, and you're looking for something to get them into gaming, or a good kind of like accessible entry point, then I think this is a really perfect game for them. So yeah, I would highly recommend checking this out if you have a PS5, of course. Soma is another game I'd like to mention. It's something that I started playing probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I got it on a sale and played through the first couple of hours and thought it was reasonably interesting, but I think I got distracted by newer and shinier things and just never went back to it until 2021. And I really should have finished it sooner. It's not an amazing game mechanically. The puzzles, the enemy design, none of that is kind of like top tier, but it has a really amazing story, and the ending is probably one of the most thought-provoking and just crazy, mind-blowing endings to a game that I've played in a long while. And if you like sci-fi horror games and survival horror games, it's definitely worth checking out. It's available on PC, PS4, actually it's available on everything. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. I gotta mention The Matrix Awakens. It's not really a game, but it did give us a glimpse at, a proper next-gen experience. It's really phenomenal to see the tech at this stage and give us a glimpse at what's in store next, like the types of games that we'll be playing in a few years' time. Definitely worth checking out if you have a next-gen system. In terms of gaming hardware, I want to make a quick mention of the EPOS GTW270S. This was a low latency gaming earbud that I reviewed very early in 2021. It kind of did what I thought was impossible with earbuds, which was basically make a low latency earbud for gaming that sounded good as well. If you're after a good gaming earbud, I would say look no further than these. They work excellently with music as well, and of course there's a review link in the description to have a look. Alright, let's get into the meaty part of this video. What were the best games and gaming related things I got to play with in 2021? Being a retro gamer, the RetroTink 5X was a must-buy for me. I previously had the RetroTink 2X, but this one obviously is 5X, not 2X, which means it basically gives you much higher resolution. So it lets you play all your old game systems in resolutions up to 1440p. So I've connected my entire retro wall, Mega Drive, GameCube, all of those old systems up to this, and it's fantastic. It lets you play all your old games in the sharpest possible resolutions, and Mike Chi, the guy who designed and sells this system, has continuously updated the software on it, giving you new features, and it's just a fantastic product overall. Yeah, if you're in the market for a scaler or for a way of playing your retro games in high resolutions, making them look as good as possible, I'd say look no further than the RetroTink 5X. It is quite pricey, or at least I think it's quite pricey for someone who's not really in the hobby of retro gaming, but for everything that the 5X does, it is worth every penny. It's a fantastic little box. Now, since I've had the 5X, I've been hitting my older consoles pretty hard, and specifically I've spent a lot of time with the PS2. I love the PS2. It has a humongous catalogue of games, and it also has a lot of obscure games that are kind of like locked to certain regions, so I've spent a lot of time kind of digging up those, and one of those was a PS2 port of the original Sega Rally arcade game. This is actually one of the first games I played on my PS2 using the 5X, and it looks phenomenal. It runs at 60 frames per second, which the Saturn port of this game didn't. The Saturn port was 30 frames per second, and it instantly took me back to being a teenager. I played the absolute living shit out of this on my Saturn. I also played it a lot in the arcade. and I instantly got hooked again. This is such a phenomenal game. If you're a youngin', this probably looks ancient and horrible and pixelated, but yeah, trust me, this was the jam back in the day, and I loved getting back into it. So yeah, this makes it onto one of my best experiences of 2021. On the retro theme, Narita Boy is a new game that came out in 2021, and it's easily the best indie game I played that year. And it is a beautifully well-designed game with interesting gameplay, puzzles to figure out, and an unexpectedly heartfelt story. Now, it's not for everyone, it's weird as hell, but yeah, if you like the look of it, if you like retro style games, you know, for modern hardware, and you like the idea of playing through something that has a bit more story than a typical kind of 2D hack and slash, definitely give this a look. I enjoyed every minute of Narita Boy. Again, there's a link to my review of this game in the description. More retro games, yes, I know. I am gonna talk about some new stuff eventually, but for the moment, Split Second, just wow, like this game, amazing. Talk about sleeping on something. I played quite a few 7th generation titles in 2021, but this one was by far the best. I didn't originally plan to make a video about it, but I played it so much and I enjoyed it so much that I had so much to say about it. This is definitely worth tracking down on either the PS3 or Xbox. I think it's on PC as well, but there is a few issues with the PC port. But if you like arcade races, look no further than this. It was developed by some of the guys that made the Burnout games. It's fast, there's a lot of action, it's got split screen. It's just a damn good time, and it's still reasonably cheap and easy to find. So yeah, do yourself a favor and track this one down because it is one not to miss. Another game from the 7th generation that I enjoyed was Space Marine. I'm not a huge 40k enthusiast, but I've always liked the idea of playing games set in the 40k universe. The problem is that the quality of these games is generally all over the place, and I'm not massively into RTS games, so Space Marine is kind of the perfect entry point if you like the 40k universe, but you're not totally into it, and you don't want to play something as heavy as an RTS. And as it turned out, it's the perfect time to play it, because the sequel just got announced. So it's not being made by the same guys, but hopefully it will be somewhere near the same quality. It's by a studio I've never heard of, and yeah, I am very much looking forward to playing the sequel. Again, this is not for everyone, but if you like your hack and slash games, this is definitely worth a look in. And once again, there's a link to my review in the description. Alright, finally we're getting to some newer stuff. Streets of Rage 4, which I know didn't come out in 2021, but the DLC, the expansion, did. And talk about a great expansion. Like, how much more I have played this game since the expansion. Like, the additional characters, they've added new moves to the existing roster, and the survival mode has just kept me playing for... I have probably sunk hundreds of hours into Streets of Rage 4 this year, way more than I did on the game's initial launch, which is saying a lot because I loved the shit out of this game. Again, review in the description. And yeah, me and my friend has spent so many hours. It's added, like, the new moves and abilities and tweaks that they've made to the gameplay have added so much depth to the combat. And it's made me go back and smash through the game on Mania, and now I'm playing through on Mania Plus. So if you have even a passing interest in beat 'em ups, you really need to check out Streets of Rage 4. The DLC expansion is definitely worth your time and money. I can't give it enough praise. It's yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. And finally, Ghost of Tsushima, which is, again, not a game that came out in 2021, but again, the expansion came out that year, so I think it technically counts as a new game or a game of 2021. And wow, like, I thought I was completely done with open world games. I thought there was nothing else that this genre could provide that would bring me back. You know, I've been burnt out on GTA. I don't really have any interest in playing another GTA for a very long time. I tried to play Red Dead 2. I got about 10 hours in and I was just like, it looks amazing, and you know, NPCs have day and night cycles, and wow, like when you skin an animal, he goes through the whole animation. But ultimately, like, I don't like the idea of there's a marker on the map, make your way to the marker, kill a bunch of bad guys, mission ending, rinse and repeat for 30 hours. Like, I was so done with that. And while Ghost of Tsushima really doesn't reinvent the sandbox formula, in many ways it's very old-fashioned in its approach to game design. It does so well. It's such a well-designed game. The combat is so amazing. I mean, the visuals, the presentation, you're looking at it now, it's a crazy looking game. There are so many times that you'll stop in this game and just look at it and be like, games are art. Like, my head is exploding. So yeah, it is easily the best open world game I've probably ever played. I really enjoyed it. I did quite a lengthy review of it a little while back, which again, I recommend checking out. Yeah, if you've been put off by the fact that it is an open world, a sandbox game, I'd say maybe cast your skepticism aside and give it a crack, because the story here, I think, is really good. It's so much better than the previous games that the developer has done. And now I can't even remember what the developer was called. Sucker Punch, Rocksteady? The guys that made the Infamous games. I was very underwhelmed by the Infamous series. They're technically very competent and mechanically they feel, nice to play, but I don't know, they lacked any kind of X factor, where this, for me, is, a real step up. This is a game that has so much X factor and is definitely worth checking out. I cannot recommend Ghost of Tsushima enough, and yeah, it was probably my most favorite game of 2021. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on 2021, the things that I played. There were so many things that I played and experienced in 2021 which I didn't talk about. This video could be 3 hours long if I went through absolutely everything. But yeah, overall I think 2021 was a really good year for me personally. I know that there weren't those big games that everyone stood up and unanimously said, yeah, this is the best thing ever. But I don't think every year has to be like that, and there were definitely games that came out in 2021 that really hit hard for some people, and Ghost of Tsushima was an example of a game that hit hard for me. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know how I went. There was probably so much more rambling than my usual videos. I'm way less concise when I'm unscripted, but hopefully you found it entertaining. And yeah, if you like this video, drop it a like. If you didn't, yeah, there's a button for that too. If this is the first video you've seen of mine, hit the subscribe button to see more. But otherwise, thanks for your time.